Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Church Encourager podcast. I'm Douglas Laws. Also here is my father, Pastor Steve Laws. We're a couple of the pastors from the Keys Vineyard Church. We like talking about church and we like encouraging. That's why we started this podcast. The content of the podcast is where we go over our discussion guide that we produce for each sermon that we do. This last weekend, I got the pleasure of preaching, so I'm going to let you, Dad, ask me questions. So
good.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to that. And like you said, these are questions that pop out on our discussion guide that's available every week. And there's a lot of good stuff on that guide, some verses to look up, some, ways to apply it. The idea behind it is, if you ever get other people that you want to have a lunch with or something, and you could talk about these things if you so desire, but you can work through them with us as well. That works out really well. So one of the things you said, and I did really enjoy this, I don't know if I got to tell you how much I enjoyed it, was the idea of you making the connection with running the football. And I really like that analogy with prayer and, that whole thing. We did the funny thing because you and I for years have pretended to be sports announcers, and it's always one of them talking about, this team needs to score more points than this team, and then the other one, and this team needs to hold that team to less points than they score. And but your analogy with, the idea of getting the run game established is huge. It sort of sets the tone for everything else.
Yeah.
And
so
really,
it
talk
makes,
about that a little more.
It makes a big difference because, I wore my Miami Dolphins jersey. I wear it one weekend of the year, opening day. And the Dolphins, they just were the worst football team I've ever witnessed. But here's the thing. Okay, my point was proven if you watch that Indianapolis Colts versus Miami Dolphins game. Indianapolis, you know what they did? They established the run game. Miami could not stop them. It was the first time in like 100 years where a team scored every time they had the ball. That was Indianapolis. I'm watching it, like, this is, my goodness. I actually, right after the game, I ordered a Buffalo Bills shirt. I'm done with the Dolphins, at least for this season, until they can establish the run game again.
Well, it might have been a good choice too, because the Bills came back in 4 minutes.
The Bills, they have something. So, hey, go Bills, saying that this season.
Right.
And,
back on track.
But yeah, back on track. That was my lamenting of the NFL there. Don't put your hope in the NFL, but it's good to make analogies.
Yes.
As far as establishing the run game, it's a part of the game. The team that controls the clock, they're in control. They've got a plan. They're executing their plan. The commentators throughout the game were using the term dominating. Indianapolis was just dominating Miami. And, if you're watching it, you could tell. When we're praying, we're not necessarily trying to dominate another team, but what we are trying to do is just, have God be in charge and control the clock, and this prevents panic. It prevents worry. Or at least helps in those things. Situationally, we'll enter into situations in our lives where we really feel like we're not in control and we can't get it through our own means. We've got guys coming at us and we've got the ball and we don't know what to do with it. And, in life, we have all these distractions, all these forces against us. And we kind of just have to get back to just praying and saying, Lord, please, help me, and start there. And, the point I was making just in life is there's some prayers that don't get answered right away. It doesn't mean God's saying no. It doesn't mean God will say yes, but he says pray continually. It's the spiritual discipline of praying that I think really sets the tone for our lives and gives us a much better life. Because it's way more fun watching your team when the run game's working. Things are just happening, then all the other aspects of the game are just moving smoother. And yeah, there's slip ups on the way, but just pound the rock, as I said, keep praying. I think it's really important for us to do in our prayer lives.
That's good. How do you think, because you're 34 now, right? And
Yep.
you grew up, in a household of believers, not my experience when I grew up. And so, but with that in mind, how has your understanding of prayer evolved throughout your spiritual journey?
Yeah, I'm so thankful because you guys were just the best parents. I can look back on my childhood and I was blessed, and we always prayed. It was just something we did as a family. And it wasn't like long, drawn out, forceful ones. It wasn't, a weird thing. It was a part of life. As we talked about this weekend, it's a relationship with God. So yes, there are spiritual disciplines that we do. There's formational things that we do as a part of our faith. But at the heart of it, it's knowing that he loves us. He was the first one to love us. We couldn't love him first. And, he gives us this amazing opportunity to find new life in him. We're transformed people. Prayer, it's a part of that. It's that catalyst for that life transformation. The Bible often talks about how it changes our hearts. It changes our minds. It's a soul transformation. We're new creations. We're new in him. And prayer, it's the fuel for that. It's the catalyst. And my whole life I've just heard you encourage me to just keep praying and press in. That's where I get that pound the rock mentality. But just my entire life, I've prayed at times, and I can reflect on all the times God's just come through in amazing ways. And, so I know I have a Savior who loves me, and he's a friend who's close by, because I need all the help I can get. So I would say prayer is where it all starts.
Good. Yeah, I like it. This was a good point too. So what's the difference between finding God's will and actually doing God's will?
Yeah. So, the term I used, that our culture would say is enlightenment. And, I watch this one podcast where this guy who's younger than me actually talks to people whose lives are just a complete mess. It's actually a financial podcast, and I might have mentioned it on this one before. But there was this one guest on the show, and all she wanted to do was just be enlightened and be someone who people would talk to, and she would just know things. And I think with our social media, at least with my generation, I don't know if this applies to yours, but with mine, we're all just looking for little tidbits of wisdom to make us feel better and just be able to do whatever we want with it. And we just want to be able to spout out just quick hitter facts. And, the doing of God's will it's not just getting those little quick hit tidbits of wisdom and just, saying whatever you want. When we're doing God's will, what we say then has the power behind it, versus if we just try telling people all the things they're doing wrong while we've got all this sin in the back seat of our car. I don't think it correlates. I think you have to start with actually living out the walk, and then you have opportunities to talk the talk. So you got to get those things in order. The doing the God's will is, yes, you do need to know it, and, God will reveal it. The challenge that we mentioned was the doing it. It's the choosing his tree, choosing God's tree, instead of choosing to do things our own way. My kids, they take history classes, and they're taking a Bible class right now, and it's in Genesis to Judges, and they use a program called Veritas Press, and it's great for middle schoolers their age. It's video based, and they really enjoy it. And they were asking me about the garden, and there's questions about like why did they live so long, and I took the Bible Project courses on those topics, and it was it's all related, but there were other there's all these things, right? There's all these things that we know, and we can have all these theories about that event. And I'm like, well, this is what these people believe. This is what these people believe. And then I just kind of came back to, but really the whole point of that story was the choice. I don't think the power was in the fruit. The power was in the choice. They had the choice to choose to follow, listen, and obey God's will, or to do their own thing. And all the power is in that realization. And we see that theme repeated throughout the Bible, as you've been teaching us throughout this series of series going on. That's it. When we start to understand that, we have the ability to choose which choice we're going to make, it's empowering. And I would encourage you to choose God's tree. Kind of going on a rabbit trail, but these are thoughts I have in the top of my head, and I feel like this is an appropriate place to say it. But there's a theologian. He's closer to my age, but his name is Wes Huff, and I saw a clip of him. Have you heard of him? Wes Huff. Wes.
I don't
Huff.
think so.
So yeah, he's I like him a lot. He's brilliant, And he made this point about talking about free will when we're talking about when we have the ability to choose. He's like, well, we don't really have free will because it's not like you can just go do whatever you want. You know what I mean? It's like I couldn't play for the Miami Dolphins just as much as I wanted to this last weekend. I don't have that ability. Now, what I do have the ability is to choose when I'm given options between what's actually possible. And so that was the difference he kind of made with those two things. I thought that was an interesting thought because people, will use the free will thing. But what God has given us is the ability to choose between doing things his way, doing things our way. And the doing his will is choosing the right tree, as we so often like to say in our sermons. So that would be the long-winded answer I have to that question. Is
that's
just
good. You're supposed to
do the
do
thing.
On podcasts, you're generally looking for the longer answer.
Yep.
So I got one more, and I think it's kind of funny, and that we'll just end with this. And the reason I think it's funny is that you and you've learned it, I think, from me. I'm a big fan of having a backup.
Oh my gosh, yes. So good having a backup.
And I've always been that way. Like, okay, well, that's good to have one, but what about a backup? What happens if something happens? What's the backup? And the question is, what area of your life do you find it most difficult to trust God's provision rather than stockpiling
your own resources?
Because I don't think it means that I don't trust God to have a backup. I just think over the course of my life, I've realized that, sometimes I've done a lot of things without a backup, but as soon as I could, a backup is a wonderful thing.
Sure.
I think about like after the hurricane here, we didn't have electricity for so long. Like in my house, it was a month.
Yeah.
And water was a long time. And so since that point in time, we have some generators in place. Like we got generators eventually, but it's much harder to get one when everybody wants one than if you have one ready to go. And so, it's that kind of thing that it makes sense to have. Okay, I'm not hoarding, right, but having a alternate plan. But what do you think about you?
One story I can think of in the Bible would be Joseph. And when he was responsible, he was like second in command in Egypt. Pharaoh's got him in charge. And Joseph has the dream that's saying there's going to be 7 years of prosperity and then 7 years of famine. And so what did Joseph do in the years of prosperity? He listened to God's wisdom, and he had enough resources to get him through those 7 years of famine. So, when we're talking about trusting in the Lord, I think it's okay to have a backup for certain things. Where the change happens, I would say, at least in my life, would be my responses to people. Because there's times where I want to make it known that I'm correct, and that, the other people should just do as I say all the time. And, I feel like that's where I sort of need to trust in the Lord, would be in my response to other people. This week I've just had several instances of just people, I feel like, getting under my skin. And, I feel like I've done okay in my responses, but, it still gets under my skin. But, you just kind of, I have to trust God in that. And that takes daily. Lord, please be with me. I, desperately need your help, or I'm going to just really lose my mind. And so that would be something I would say that's an area I could trust in God more so than my own understanding, because my own understanding can be a little mean sometimes when I'm interacting with other people. When I can just, you're laughing and you shouldn't. When we trust in the Lord, perhaps our responses are a little, kinder. And, I have to vent to you sometimes. I have other people that I can, relate with, and I'm so appreciative of that. And, I've just been like, okay, I need to just kind of talk this out before I respond to this person about this situation, so I don't affect the relationship, because that's what's more important than what I want. And that's what's, it's ultimately, it's that is our relationships. It's righteousness. I use the phrase is right relationships. It's right relationships with God and right relationships with others. So I feel like in my life, I have to trust in God's provision for how I can relate to other people rather than trying to do it on my own understanding. So, when you're talking about hurricane supplies, we live on an island. We're 100 miles away from not being on an island. It's wise to have a few resources just in case. where it would get ridiculous is if you had like 1,000 rolls of toilet paper downstairs. You know what I mean? So like everything in moderation, it's good.
Yeah.
If you're watching football, just watch a game or two. Don't ignore your family,
Right.
and just everything there. So, yeah,
Good.
yeah.
I only have a dozen rolls of toilet paper downstairs.
I think that's appropriate. And like with toilet paper math, 12 rolls equals like 96 rolls of toilet paper. You see these ridiculous
The math is
equations
nuts.
they have.
Yeah. I have 6 rolls of paper towel, which are good, like 24.
Yeah,
So all is well.
Yeah, I will buy another 6-pack when I'm down to like 2 packs of paper
Yeah.
towel, and then you just. But these are like our traumas of what we've had to live with. Like, oh no, I couldn't buy toilet paper for a week. What am I going to do?
Yeah. Well, that was,
that was ridiculous.
That was a COVID thing. Okay. Well, I think you've done great. Why don't you, well, I can say goodbye to everybody. Thanks for watching, and really appreciate you guys hanging out with us at Church Encourager, and look for the next one. The Obin podcast will come out on Thursday, and we'll be talking about next week. We're going to wrap up the series we're in next week.
Kingdom Tension Part 20.
The 7th series, and I'm talking about the importance of the word. So looking forward to that. But I think we've done good today. See you guys.
All right. God bless y'all. We'll see you next week.